We'll go through introductions in a bit here, but a couple of points I wanted to hit on during this session are release cadence considerations post go live. Data reporting, we'll be looking at this from a personal versus system standpoint. When would you use one or the other? Scheduling the biannual wave releases from Microsoft, and then some system maintenance tips that will be helpful both immediately after go live and then down the road as you get more information in your system. I'm your presenter, Drew Weaver. I'm a senior functional consultant on the Dynamics 365 CE client services team, essentially CE support. I've got 10 years of experience working in support on the CE side, and I've been at Stone Ridge about 1.5 of those years. So let's dive right in and talk about release cadence considerations. And I use the word considerations specifically. This is one of those situations where there's really no Cinderella shoe perfect fit for all cases. Um, I've laid out 5 different things to consider about what your timing would be, and the duration of short versus long is really kind of up to you as a business. And so the first thing we would look at is the expected change volume. This is kind of hard to nail down on an ongoing basis, but certainly coming out of your implementation, there are probably some items, wish list items or high priority items that were not able to be taken care of during your implementation project that you want to take care of post go live. So what is the volume of that? And so you really want to balance that between, okay, do we want to include fewer components but have more frequent releases to get those into the system? Or do we want to include a lot of new stuff but have maybe less frequent releases when it comes time for that? Um, the second thing you should consider is the number of affected users in your system with any changes you might make. If you have more affected users or affected departments, you're going to want to stretch out that release window. Um, that will allow great time for testing and just making sure that everyone's on the same page and no one set of users or department is detrimentally affected by the release from sandbox into production. Complexity of your system. It's fairly straightforward. The more complex your system, the longer the release window should be. You just want to ensure a lot of time to test those changes and make sure that any integrations or custom plugins or things like that are firing as expected when these changes come through. Number 4, we've already talked about it, allow time for testing. The more changes you have, the more complex your system is, the more affected users or departments, that's going to equate to more testing time. That's going to stretch out your release window. And then urgency of changes. If something is more urgent, you should shrink that release window. High priority issues are high priority for a reason. They need to get through faster. So you might even think about having a special release to take care of any big bugs or showstoppers that might have entered the system at any point. So as part of the release cadence, communication with your users is absolutely crucial. There's nothing worse as a user than suddenly logging into the system someday and your process has changed or things look different and you can't find something or something is just flat out broken and you don't know why, you don't know who to reach out to. It's just frustrating, it's confusing, it's just not good. So if you are going to have a defined fixed release cadence, notify users of what that cadence is expected to be, when it will be going into effect, and what to expect leading up to the release and after release when it's been pushed into the production environment. Let users know several days in advance of a scheduled release. Send out a notification to the team, include the details on what will be included in that release, as well as who to reach out to with questions, concerns before and after that release. Send another notification on the day of the release, and then after it's been successfully pushed into the system so that users know that, yes, we didn't have to abort for any reason. It was pushed through. And as a reminder, these are the changes that you should expect to see now that these changes have pushed through into production. So data reporting. Again, we're looking at this from the perspective of when should we go with personal views, charts, dashboards versus system views, charts, and dashboards. And The general rule of thumb in my years of working in support, you should really err on the side of system whenever possible. Um, this means if it's a system component, anyone with proper security permissions can make those adjustments. It ensures a more uniform method of reporting. So if you have certain standards that you want to meet with your reporting, having it from a top-down perspective is going to ensure that those standards are met. And it's unaffected by users being deactivated or being removed from the system. This contrasts with when something is built as a personal view or component, where if a user leaves or the user is removed from the system and they did not allow anyone else to have customization privileges or reassignment privileges, it can be a challenge to move that from the system or make changes or do any kind of adjustments after that person is gone without reactivating that user, logging as that user and making those changes. Um, but there is a time and place for personal components. Personal components are good for one-off needs or temporary needs. So let's say I need to look at a set of information only really for 1 week, but I need to keep coming back to it over and over during that week. Great. Build yourself a personal view, save it, come back to it, and then if you remember, best practice would be once you're done with it, just remove it from the system. So if it's just a one-off or temporary need, or if it's really only useful for a very small or niche group of users, you don't necessarily want to build a system view that really only 3 people out of 300 are going to use. That would be a good time to use a personal view. So one of the downsides of personal views, they're really invisible to system administrators unless that person who's created them also shared it out with the system admins. And maintenance can be challenging as the users leaves a company. Like I said before, if they did not grant users permission or any other user permission to make edits or changes, it can be challenging to clear them out of the system, make edits, reassign, things like that. You can see I've included links below each of those. That is a walkthrough on how to create system views and and personal views. We aren't going to cover that in today's session, but it's useful information. If you don't know how to do it, you can use those links and get more information about that. Scheduling the biannual wave releases. I've got a link down below that you can use to see when a release is coming and what is included in that release. So to install a Wave release, you would navigate to the Power Platform Admin Center. I've got a link down in the bottom left there. Specifically, you'd be going to a particular environment. You'd click into that environment, and then you'll see an update section, as you can see in this screenshot. You can see if what the current release is or upcoming release is, if it's been turned on or not. And if it's not been turned on, you can click the manage link there and get it installed. And it used to be that you could schedule these releases. Now it's you press the button and it installs, so be aware of that. So best practices or tips for successful Wave releases: always install a Wave release in your sandbox environment or environments. First, to test out new functionality and to check to see if there are any bugs introduced in these Wave releases. If possible, you see functionality that you know you're not going to use or you're not going to use right away. If there's a way to hide or disable that, go ahead and do that. That's going to be more beneficial to users to eliminate any clutter or confusion. If they suddenly see new functionality that you don't intend on using, you don't intend on users using, they can, be frustrated or confused, and it can interrupt their daily routine. So if you can hide it or disable it, do that. If there are any fixes or workarounds for any bugs that might have been introduced in the Wave release in the sandbox, make any fixes, bundle those into a solution, and then when you do the import of the Wave release into production, if those issues still persist at that point in time, you can import that solution up into production with all those fixes intact, and it's already going to have those taken care of. You don't have to worry about fixing them anew. System maintenance tips. We're going to be having 2 different sets of tips. One is table relationships. Specifically, we're going to be covering what to do about parent relationship types. and storage capacity. Now we're going to be getting kind of into the weeds here, but I think it's helpful if you aren't familiar with table relationships or you're not super familiar with storage capacity. I just want to provide you with as much context as possible. So table relationships, again, we're going to be focusing on the parental behavior type between one to many table relationships. If you have these intact, and by default, they are prevalent in quite a few places in the big five tables. Big five would be accounts, contacts, leads, opportunities, and cases. There can be some unexpected downstream consequences. If you take an action on the parent record, there could be cascading behaviors on the related children records. So cascading delete, reassignment, other actions will cascade down from the parent to the child. So we'll look at a specific example that hopefully will illustrate this for you. So let's say we have an account owned by user Joe Schmo. We're going to be reassigning it to user Jane Doe. With the default parental relationship types in place, all of the related activities, contacts, opportunities, quotes, orders, invoices, and more, anything that has a parental behavior type between the account and the children records, those are all going to be reassigned to Jane Doe, all of those children records, no matter who is the original owner of those children records. So if that's a little bit hard to visualize, let's take a look at what that would look like in practice. So here's a scenario. We've got owner of the account is Joe Schmo, various owners of children records down below. If and when we assign the account from Joe Schmo to Jane Doe, and those parental behaviors are intact, everything down below, not just the account, will be reassigned to Jane Doe. This can lead to confusion and frustration from users. It affects data integrity and data quality because we are kind of losing that history of ownership of all of these children records. And you can easily see what the issue is if you scale this up from what's on the slide, these handful of records, to a more established system that might have dozens or hundreds of records downstream that would all be reassigned in an instant just by reassigning one account record. Now, that's exponentially worse when or if you were to reassign several account records and all of their children records are reassigned accordingly based on that parental behavior. So what do we do? What can we do to change this? And I would recommend that you at least take a look and potentially change this behavior early on. You can do it right after implementation. And to do that, this is one of the rare times that I will direct you into the classic interface versus the modern interface. The classic interface allows you to see these relationship behavior types at a glance. It's not the case in modern interface at this point in time. It will come, but right now I would direct you to the classic interface to deal with this. So in your lowest CE environment, your lowest sandbox, navigate to the gear icon in the top right and go to Advanced Settings. In the new tab that opens, navigate to Solutions, create a new solution to house your changes. This is something you're going to be making the change in your lowest environment, moving them all up to your higher sandbox and ultimately into production when you make these changes. So again, I'd recommend that you add the big five tables, accounts, contacts, leads, opportunities, cases, generally custom tables, and their relationships to other tables will be referential, so they should not be affected by this. And then go and look, if you expand the table out and you go to one-to-many relationships, you'll see the type of behavior. And again, we're going to be focused on the parental relationships. So you want to add all of those to your solution and then open each one. And you're going to see down at the bottom the type of behavior. We're going to switch that from parental to configurable cascading. And that is going to unlock all of the options, the drop downs below that. We'll focus on assignment, but this behavior would apply to any of those other types as well. So if you look at the assign drop down, you're going to see a few different options. So it defaults to cascade all, but there are a couple of different options in there as well, besides just all or nothing. Cascade active. What this will do, if you change the behavior of this to cascade active, it will reassign children records for that table relationship, but only the open or active records. So think, I want the account owner to inherit the open opportunities that are tied to this account. That would be a good reason to use Cascade Active for that relationship. Cascade User Owned. This is only going to reassign children records that were owned by the original owner of the account. So in our example, this would only reassign children records that were originally owned by Joe Schmo. User A and user B's records will be unaffected and they will retain their ownership of those children records. The last one is self-explanatory. It's the opposite of Cascade All. It's Cascade None. This will not cascade any assignment behavior or other types of behavior down to the children records. And really, this is the most commonly selected option. Okay, let's move on to storage capacity management. To see your CE/Dataverse storage capacity, you're going to be making your way back to that admin, the Power Platform Admin Center. I've included a link up above. When you are there, you'll navigate on the left-hand side, you'll expand resources and you'll click capacity. And when you do that, you'll see the screen that we have there on the right that shows overall across all environments in your tenant, what's taking up your database space, your file space, and your log space. And then to drill in deeper, you can start by going to that Dataverse tab, and that's going to tell you per environment what the breakdown of database, file, and log capacity is. But let's first start by defining what those categories are and what they mean, and what kinds of information are stored in each. So for database, this is the data that's actually entered in your records in CE. When you're in a record, you're filling out a form in CE, that information is stored in the database category. File is pretty much exactly what you would expect. So this would be email attachments or attachments to notes. If there are image file, or if there's an image field like on your account or contact, or you add a file data type, that information, the files uploaded there, will be stored under the file category. And then logs are audit logs or plug and trace logs. Pretty straightforward. Now that we have that context, this is what we would be seeing when we click on the Dataverse tab. It's going to be breaking down the overview by environment into the different categories. And what's not maybe immediately obvious is that you can drill down even further. And to do that, you can click on those, I would say, good day on the stock market icons, and those are actually hyperlinks. And so if you click on one of those hyperlinks, it's going to drill you down even further by environment. And so what does that look like? So what you would see on your screen would be something like this. It would show database usage, file usage, and log usage. I've only included database usage just for visibility and clarity's sake. And you can see it shows, okay, in this environment, you're taking up this much, this many gigabytes or this many megabytes of database storage. And then in the graph, you're going to see the top 10 tables that are taking up the most space. As you hover over each node there in that chart, it's going to show you by date how much space that table was taking up, right? And so this chart will show you rolling 28 days worth of information. Prior to that, it gets chopped off and you're not going to see that. But this will give you your 28-day history of what are the biggest troublemakers in your storage capacity. So one other cool thing with the database usage area is in that little hamburger icon in the top right, if you click download all tables, that's going to output every single one of your tables in your database, not just the top 10, but every single table and how much space it's taking up at that point in time when you've clicked that link. So then you'll be able to see number 11, number 15, number 5,000, right? And see how much space each table is taking up. So as you're approaching your storage limitations, and you will over time, sooner or later, approach these limitations, what are your options and what do you do? So first, you'll use the information we just looked at in the previous slide to determine which table or tables are having the biggest impact on your storage capacity. This is going to give you the most bang for your buck if you start acting on these tables that are causing the biggest problems. Next thing you would do is to determine if users only need a subset of the data from those tables in order to work in their day-to-day lives. So think, do users really need emails beyond a year's worth in the system? If so, okay, we'll have to explore other options. If not, you may want to consider creating a recurring bulk delete job that every 30 days or so chops off any emails that are prior or created prior to 12 months ago and removes them and deletes them from the system. You'll want to have, if you're looking at emails, you will want to consider, hey, what do we do with the attachments? Do we want to keep those in the system, or are we good getting rid of those as well? But that's another consideration. That's table by table. Now, the other thing you can say is, well, can some of this data be extracted from the CE system and stored elsewhere? There are potential cost considerations here, but if it's a simple table and you can use just the out of the box export to Excel, great. There's no additional cost to you. If that will work and you store it somewhere maybe on SharePoint that users have access to and know how to get to for older records, perfect. You can extract that data out, store it in SharePoint, and then get rid of any of the records in CE that you've performed that export on. There are other options. So think data lake or storage blobs, things like that. That would require integrations. And so this is where the greater costs come into play. You might need to do that if, for example, you need to clear information from your CE system, but you need to store it for a certain duration of time, or it's just useful to have accessible to users in sort of a semi-structured or more structured way, more structured than a spreadsheet, for example. You might consider that. So you push it out to whatever other system, remove it from CE storage. Hopefully over time you're saving costs, but initially upfront to build out that process, you'll probably be incurring time and financial costs to get that up and running. The other thing you can do is determine if purchasing additional storage is the best way to go. This comes at a definite cost. Uh, Purchasing is right there in the name. So you would work with your license provider to see what the current cost is for increasing one of those categories of storage, whichever one whose storage you need to increase. So, okay, let's pretend you've ignored the mailings from Microsoft as you've approached that 15% mark to your ceiling and you've gone over. What happens? Well, day to day, nothing really. Your system is still going to continue functioning as normal. You won't really see any impact on your day-to-day activities. So where it comes into play is basically environment related actions. So if you go over capacity on any of those categories, you won't be able to create any new environments, copy any environments, restore any environments, convert a trial into a paid environment, recover an environment, or add a Dataverse database to an environment if it doesn't already exist. Now, most of these not really a big deal. You can probably get away with not creating a new environment or converting a trial into a paid environment for a while. But when you need to restore an environment, let's say someone deleted a bunch of accounts and that cascaded down and deleted a bunch of children records to those accounts, you need to get that information back. You got to restore an environment, and if you are over capacity, not going to happen. So you want to really maintain that below your allotment storage capacity for the rare and hopefully never occurring possibility of having to restore an environment in a sort of emergency situation. I've included a link down below that gives more information about the storage, what happens about when you go over storage, and just general information about storage capacity. It's very, very useful. Good information there. And I would be remiss as a member of the client services team if I didn't plug our team. We do more than break fix. We've got comprehensive and flexible coverage for you. You can see all the stuff that we can do for you. If you're not already a customer, go ahead and navigate to stoneridgesoftware.com, fill out a contact us form, and we would love to have you as a client.